Welcome to the 2023-2024 NBA Deep Dive Series, where we're going through every single team in the NBA from worst to first, from lowest rated to highest rated. And today we have the Brooklyn Nets, who I think everybody knows what kind of funny story their team has been on in the last few years. They were a young, up-and-coming team. D'Angelo Russell, Kenny Atkinson, Karis LeVert. Everybody wanted to be in Brooklyn to join this young squad, including Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, who come over, supermax contracts, and they're like, we're going to transform this team from pretenders to contenders. And then all of a sudden, James Harden becomes available, and they say, you know what, trade away the future for James Harden. So Jared Allen goes to the Cavaliers. Karis LeVert, the rest of their depth went away. I think that was when they traded away Dinwiddie as well for James Harden. But basically, the entire team got blown up so they could bring around James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, who, when healthy and playing together, were a dominant trio of players. Some of the most electric, awesome NBA talent we've ever seen, all on the same team, and they played well together. But injuries were the bane of the existence. Then Kyrie Irving hated the Jews, and James Harden continued to be fat, so they traded away James Harden for Ben Simmons. That was a disaster. Then they traded away Kyrie Irving because he didn't want to play basketball for them anymore. Don't forget that they had to get rid of Steve Nash because he was the worst coach in the history of basketball. And then finally, they traded away Kevin Durant and got some actual draft capital, because for the rest of the trades, they kind of were on the losing end of every single one of those trades, including getting rid of a Jared Allen while they had to pick up James Harden, including getting back like one first-round pick, maybe two for the Mavericks. So all in all, this Nets squad has been undergoing a ton in the past few seasons. But we're going to hone in on this roster as presently constructed. They are going to be coming in at 17th, and they are in a bit of a weird spot because A, they don't have any other draft picks for the next 6 years or so. So it doesn't matter if they're horrible and trying to compete for the top picks in the lottery because, well, those picks belong to the Houston Rockets or various other teams. At the same time, they don't have the superstar talent. They don't have a Luka Doncic, and they don't have a Jason Tatum. They have a Mikal Bridges, who is clearly ascending, as we all saw last season, but is he going to be a number one on a championship squad? Probably not. But they do have a pretty good head coach in Jacque Vaughn, who brought this team to 9th in defense after defense being horrendous under head coach Steve Nash. The offense wasn't great, but the defense was much better, and that was kind of the night and day difference between having an actual NBA head coach versus having Steve Nash, where they finished last year 4th in deflections, 6th in charges taken, 11th in contesting threes. It's not like they were a top 3 defense by any stretch of the imagination, but they gave you effort and actually tried. And it only makes me wonder how good this team would have been if Jacque Vaughn was the head coach from day one. But they did finish with that solid record, 45-37, although it's not as good as it could have been, and it's not as bad as it could have been because they traded everybody away at around the midseason mark. So they were I think they were the top seed in the East for a couple stretches there last season before they basically collapsed. So they're probably closer to a sub 500 team. Finished 6th in the Eastern Conference last year, which they did get a playoff spot, falling eventually to the Philadelphia 76ers. 17th in the last year's power rankings, which is a far cry from being first the year before that, 2021, when they first assembled the Big Three. But they do have a 79.46 rating. Let's talk about their offseason. So it's more the midseason that was a big deal. Traded away Kevin Durant, traded away Kyrie Irving. The only guy who stuck around is Ben Simmons because he was untradeable. But they did lose Yuta Watanabe, who was actually a really good player for them last year. I don't know if role players can take a jump from being borderline out of the league in the G League to a bona fide piece of their rotation. I don't know if he was ever starter quality, but he knocked down his threes and he tried so hard on defense. He was one of the few guys who would just fly around, dive after loose balls. Yuta Watanabe had a breakout year, all things being equal. They traded away Joe Harris, who really just hasn't been the same player. He's a classic 3-no-D guy, but when the three isn't falling, he's unplayable. And the three hasn't fell in a couple of years, to be honest. Seth Curry is gone. It's not great, but he is a defensive liability, and he could go to a team that's going to offer a little more scoring versatility. They don't really need that right now in the Brooklyn Nets. They're trying to get younger and better all around, 3 and D, and Patty Mills gone for the same reason. They are picking up Lonnie Walker Jr., who's an interesting pickup because, honestly, I thought he was going to get signed to at least a mid-level exception. They brought him in on a veteran's minimum, picked up Trendon Watford because the Trailblazers just got rid of him for nothing, and then their first-round picks, Dariq Whitehead, Jalen Wilson, Noah Clowney also on this list. We'll talk about him when we talk to him because we need to first talk about Spencer Dinwiddie, and I really like Spencer Dinwiddie's game. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea, but he's a professional scorer, man. He's got a really good corner three-pointer. He's got decent step-back threes off the dribble. His mid-range games leaves a little something to be desired, but he's good at driving to the paint and either throwing it down with authority, drawing contact, getting to the free throw line. He's a good 15 to 20 minutes a night, no matter what is happening. And he is prone to throwing down a mean dunk at least once a game. He's elite at dribbling the ball for 10 seconds, breaking down his man, and then driving hard once the defender shifts his weight to 1 foot or the other just gets him a little off balance. And then he's a bucket around the rim and can drive and kick to open guys. His ability to actually read the court and predict where the defense is going to rotate isn't great. He's not a true natural facilitating point guard, but he is more than a willing passer, evidenced by his 6.5 assists last season. In fact, just looking at his Brooklyn numbers alone, he elevated that to 9.1 assists on 2.1 turnovers. I mean, he was really good last year for them. He was a versatile guy, asked to be the ISO king, and he did a pretty good job of it, man. When he gets asked to be a catch and shoot player for Luka Doncic, he does that well. He just does a little bit of everything well other than when he was on the Washington Wizards. He's one of these guys who's a classic good when he's the helper of the team, but he's bad when he's the center of the team. You don't want him to be a number one, but Spencer Dinwiddie's not bad being like a number 3 option. And for this team, there was a lot of shot creation issues on their new look net squad. Dorian Finney-Smith can't create. Cam Johnson can't create. Mikal Bridges is still learning to create, so it's up and coming. Ben Simmons is a disaster. Royce O'Neale can't create. Cam Thomas can to some extent, but there were a lot of possessions where they were tasked with Spencer Dinwiddie to bail them out of the possession. He was the one who would take up that really bad shot, 5 seconds left on the shot clock, defense swarming because he has no conscience. He knows his role in this team, and that role was to pretty much bail the team out and do his best job at carrying them to victory. So while Spencer Dinwiddie isn't a great player, he's a really good player and a positive force to have in the locker room. He's the consummate professional. When he was in Dallas, he was solid, even though his role was completely reduced thanks to Luka Doncic. When he comes to the Brooklyn Nets, he always gets a little bit better because they ask him to do more. The only disaster on his, basically all of his career was dealing with that injury where he shredded, I think, his knee, and then dealing with the Washington Wizards, which everybody sucks when they go to the Wizards, so I can't put any of the blame on him. But Spencer Dinwiddie is at least good enough to be a starting point guard in this league. Then the rest of the roster gets a little bit interesting. Is Lonnie Walker going to start? Is Ben Simmons going to start? They're going to play Spencer Dinwiddie at the 2. Is Royce O'Neale going to be the starting shooting guard? I don't really know. So this is the roster I'm going with: Dinwiddie, Mikal Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, Nic Claxton, which means Mikal Bridges, the future of this team. And boy, oh boy, did he completely ball out. He was a lockdown defender, my 2021 Defensive Player of the Year when he lost to Marcus Smart, coming in second. He's learning to shot create. And his growth, just going from a new team and being tasked with more responsibilities, was so impressive. He was developing spots on the floor to be automatic from in the mid-range. He really loves that left-hand pull-up from the elbow. There's just so much more shot creation to his game now. He's making shots off the dribble, going either direction, fading, getting creative, and finishing with either hand. It's honestly just one of the most stark and remarkable performances that we've ever seen somebody go, who was, I think he's a 4-year guy at a college too, but he looks like Kevin Durant out there for the Nets. It was wild. He averaged 26 points a night for them. I think in the future, he's going to be an easy 25 points a night and he's one of those guys like a number 1 for a bad team and number 2 for a good team. But the growth that he showed was incredible. And it also continued on in the playoffs when defenses get tougher. The scouting reports come out. The team is just focused and locked in on you. Mikal Bridges, being the number 1 for the Nets, still put up a 23-5-4 stat line against the 76ers. He bumped his mid-range scoring on 37% on 1.3 attempts per game to 45% on 3.2 attempts per game. He was 8th in defensive plus-minus for all small forwards. He plays 82 games a season consistently. I mean, Mikal Bridges is just one of the most remarkable players in the NBA. Now, there is room to grow still, and we saw that in the FIBA tournament with Team USA. He's, like I said, a number 1 on a bad team, probably a number 2 on a good team. But if he continues to develop, he is going into his year 27, 28 season, I want to say. I'm not sure how much brighter the future is going to be for Mikal Bridges because he is starting to hit his prime. But even this version, this caliber of Mikal Bridges that we get is pretty remarkable. And I'm nothing but impressed with the steps that he has taken. Moving on to Dorian Finney-Smith, who was horrible last year for the Nets. He's your prototypical 3-and-D big wing player. He's about 6'9" with a 7-foot wingspan. Played a lot of small ball 5 for this Brooklyn Nets team when they were just going super short. But his shooting splits in Brooklyn specifically were horrendous. 35, 30, 78. And that's just unacceptable for a guy who boosted his 3-point shot up to almost 40% for the Mavericks. I believe he was an undrafted guy, but he came to the league about 29%, boosted that to 31%, then took a big step up in the 2019 season, 37%. Then he's been traditionally hanging around there, 39, and then last year, 35 for the Mavericks, and then he came over to the Brooklyn Nets and shot 30%. So I don't know, maybe it was the difference in time zone that he was struggling with. But once Dorian Finney-Smith gets that three-point shot up closer to his career average 38, we'll say, percent, he's going to be a bona fide starter for this team. His defense is locked down. He's got great size in him. His perimeter defense isn't the best. He doesn't have the most lateral quickness, but he's just so versatile with that big frame. And this team is long, man. Spencer Dinwiddie's about 6'6". Mikal Bridges, Defensive Player of the Year. Dorian Finney-Smith, lockdown. Cam Johnson is at least an average defender, if not slightly above average. And then Nic Claxton, also Defensive Player of the Year candidate. This team's defensive versatility is going to be unreal. Speaking on Cam Johnson, and I like Cam. He can be either a starter or role player for basically any team in the league. He's knocked down from the three-point line. He'll fit into his role of catch and shoot and then play a little defense. He can play make a little bit if you ask him to, hence but 2.1 assists per game last year. He's not a good rebounder, only about 4.8 for the Brooklyn Nets last year, which is something that you like to see him do a little bit more with, get a little better. He's not the strongest guy to play the power forward position. He's really more of a small forward, power forward, kind of hybrid, 6'8", not someone that you can build around, but certainly somebody who you can build with. His and Mikal Bridges' chemistry is just really good. He increased his role and aggression on the Brooklyn Nets when he came over, similar to Mikal Bridges. His free throw rate jumped from 1.9 to 3.5 after the trade. All in all, Cam Johnson has been a fairly remarkable player, but he's not going to overwhelm you with his talent, his physical skill set. And on the FIBA team, he was like the lowest rated player that they had out of everybody. That included Walker Kessler, I think. Realistically, with Cam, he's just the perfect prototypical 3-and-D power forward in today's NBA. I don't think there's too much more than that. I don't see the elevation in his game that Mikal Bridges took. I don't see the shot creation. I don't see the defensive versatility. But he's a good starter for this team to have and build around with all of the other guys. And he's got to knock that three-pointer down next season. Nic Claxton, though, is an interesting piece. And first of all, shout out Nic Claxton for stepping up this season defensively. And also shout out the Brooklyn Nets for just continuing to pick up remarkable centers. First Jared Allen, then Nic Claxton. Now, Nick has always had incredible perimeter defense for a 5. He helped that switch everything defensive schemes that Steve Nash had, but his lateral quickness was incredible. He's literally can guard 1 through 5. But last season, man, he stepped up even more and almost was Defensive Player in the Year. He ranked in the 78th percentile in isolation defense, allowing 0.79 points per possession. In 76 games, he only didn't have a block in 6 games. In 5 games, he had 5+ blocks. In 36 games, he had 3+ blocks. He even improved his finishing around the rim. His 3 to 10 feet field goal percentage jumped from 34 to 51%. Just all around, Nic Claxton took a step up last season. Now, his offense is always going to be a problem. He can't do much more than finish slightly around the rim and then catch the alley-oops, and his strength is going to be a problem, but because of that, he does have the lateral quickness that most centers don't have. So there's a trade-off. If you want him to get bigger and bulk more, he's not going to be as nimble and agile on the perimeter, and when you're running a switch everything defense like the Nets like to do, well, Nic Claxton is kind of the key to that. So he's definitely going to be up there if he continues to dominate the defensive glass like he did and block everybody's shots. There's a Defensive Player of the Year somewhere in Nic Claxton coming up in his near future, and he's still a young kid as well. Only going to be 24 next year. Now, I don't expect 2 things to improve. One, I don't think he's going to take that humongous jump that he took last season, where his defensive rating jumped from 111 to 108. His VORP jumped from 0.6 to 2.9. I don't see him taking that much of a jump next season to where he's got like a 5.0 VORP. But at the same time, I think he's going to steadily improve. He's going to continue his dominance in the defensive end. And I think this team has the capability of being the #1 defense in the NBA if they stay healthy. So that's something that you can certainly hang your hat on. Now, defense in the NBA is a little tougher to grade than offense because there's 82 games, whereas offense, you can kind of just go out every night, make or miss, and still take your own shots. Defense, you got to be locked in and night out. That's going to be a little bit tough, but this team is certainly going to be menacing on that end with their team defense. Moving on to Ben Simmons. And I just, oh boy. What I think when talking about a bust, beyond the shooting, beyond the mental, beyond the efforts and failures, is Ben Simmons' complete lack of durability too, because every single year that he plays, he's going to miss at least half of the season, even worse than Anthony Davis, even worse than Zion Williamson. And if he so much as just punches the air because another fan makes fun of his 5 points, forces box score, he's going to be out with a sore wrist for 3 nights. It's nuts how not durable he is, how not mentally tough he is. Everything about Ben Simmons is frustrating because he still has the potential to be a defensive player of the year, all NBA, point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center, whatever he wants to be, if he just wanted it bad enough and if he could stay healthy enough. And that's what irks most people about NBA players and about Ben Simmons specifically, is they have all this potential, all this God-given talent that some dude named Steve, who's 5'8", doesn't have. So Ben Simmons can be literally one of the best players in the NBA if he wanted it bad enough. And just for whatever reason, his mental and his physical has not come along. Y'all can still remember when Stephen A. Smith said he was a jump shot away from being the second coming of LeBron James, and he's just been lesser than. Now, I am going to give him a 78 overall rating because he still has that potential. He still can be good. Is he going to be? Probably not. I ain't betting on it, but he has the potential to be a really good player, and we'll leave Ben Simmons at that. As for their free agent pickup, Lonnie Walker, now the value is more impressive than anything else. They signed him on a $2 million contract last year, and after that big game that he had in the playoffs where he literally willed the Lakers team to a victory, I was honestly expecting him to get, like a $10 million deal, some kind of Jordan Clarkson-ish. He's a skywalking 6'4" scoring guard. He can really heat up from three, but he can also really cool down, and that's where his liabilities are. I wish he had just some semblance of consistency, because when LeBron James and AD were injured, he'd give you some really good games, and then he'd give you some horrendous stinkers. So that overall 0.2 VORP is kind of misleading. It's going to be like a 2.0 VORP and then a negative 2.0 VORP depending on the game. Now, his ratings aren't great. Offensive rating 111, defensive rating 117. He's a negative box plus minus guy, but that also has to do with the fact that when he was on the court, LeBron James and Anthony Davis wasn't. So how much do you want to take that with a grain of salt? His three-point shot is a little better than I would say at 36.5%. His corner threes were 41%, and those are usually the catch and shoot threes. So I think he's sort of transformed his game. Not to Malik Monk, but similar to what he brought to the Lakers squad, where he'll catch and shoot the three at a decent clip. He'll try hard on defense, but he's just not going to give you all that much. Steals 0.5 per game, blocks 0.3 per game, but he is a freak athlete, and he can certainly microwave as a scorer, just like Cam Thomas, who's really similar, except less of an athlete and more of a bona fide scorer, because Cam Thomas coming out of LSU was a mid-range assassin. He was just a shot creator, could elevate and just give you buckets, and that's why he gave you a couple of 40-point games last year, is because he is a natural scorer. His problems come in on the defensive end. It's just not there, both physically and athletically and mentally. Cam Thomas on the defensive end is a liability. He's got a defensive rating of 118. He's got a defensive box plus minus a negative 2.0. You look at his steal and blocks numbers, 0.4 steals, 0.1 blocks, even stretching that out to per 100 possessions. It's barely a steal a game. Like, he's not going to be out there for defensive purposes. He's going to be out there to score in bunches. And he can do that, especially when his three-point shot jumps from his rookie year, 27%, to last year, 38%. But he is a bit of a turnover machine. He's not going to facilitate for you, and he is a defensive liability. So even though Cam Thomas is a fun guy to root for, there's a lot of weaknesses that you have to think about and take into account when you're playing him on the team. That's why he wasn't a starter. That's why he only played in 57 games last year, because there are issues and flaws in his game. Now, can he improve that? Can he get those better? Sure. Is he going to? I'm not really certain, because a lot of these younger guys, they focus on offense only. So we're going to have to see with Cam Thomas, young guy going into his year 22 season, but he is a scorer with severe limitations. Kind of like Royce O'Neale, who is a scorer with severe limitations. And by scorer, I mean catch and shoot three-point shooter and not much else. I'm told he's a good defender, and man, I just don't see it when I watch his games. Last year in Brooklyn, had his worst defensive rating of his career at 115. Defensive box plus minus was the worst at his career at 0.6. So like, theoretically, he was a positive defensive player, but when he's out there, to me, he looks like a liability. He doesn't move his feet all that well. He has really stiff hips. He misses rotations. He tries hard, I guess, but it's just not great defense. And even though he shoots 39% from three for his career, it feels like he misses a lot. He's one of those classic guys. I always tell you, not all threes are created equal. When you don't need a three, Royce O'Neale can make it for you. But when you need one to win the game, he's going to miss, except for that one game winner he hit. His offense isn't great outside of shooting. He does a lot of that Ben Simmons where he'll catch the ball and then immediately kick it to somebody else, set barely a flare screen or a ghost screen, and then immediately run to the three-point line. Do almost nothing as far as the defensive rotations are concerned when he's on the offensive side of the court. But he is a career 38% three-point shooter, so rest his laurels on that. He might be a possible trade target. as the season progresses and this team might look to move in a younger direction. We'll have to see. Royce O'Neale certainly has his value on the offensive court. I just don't love what he brings to a team. I would look in a different direction. I wasn't a big fan when they traded away a first-round pick for him. Moving on, and they're a little limited at the backup center position. It could be Day'Ron Sharpe. It could be Trendon Watford. It could be even the rookie Noah Clowney here, but I'm going to go with Day'Ron Sharpe for now, even though he is still super young. I don't think he's ready for the NBA just yet. He's still just a really raw kid, kind of bad at everything. He's got that athleticism. I say it in the draft process where guys run around like baby deer. They're still not used to their massive frames. Day'Ron Sharpe, even though he's a little bit shorter as a center, 6'9" out there, he's just kind of awkward. And he's a big, strong kid. But even with that, he's not a great defender. I'm not sure if he's even cut out for the NBA just yet. I think he still might have a chance. And he had a much better second half of the season last year, hence why his per 100 numbers look remarkable. Now, he is a foul machine, though, picks up 5.8 fouls per 36. That's a problem. But you stretch out his numbers last season per 100 possessions, 118 offensive rating, 111 defensive rating. His per 100 is 20 points and 17.7 rebounds, which is obviously not sustainable for a big guy like him, but there might be some backup center talent there. We're just going to need to see more tape. He only played in 48 games last year, only started 3 of them, played a combined 500 minutes last year. For his career, he's only played 943 minutes. We just need to see more on Day'Ron Sharpe, but there might be a center out there. I kind of liked his game at UNC. I didn't love it when he got drafted, but we'll have to see because there are guys trying to replace him on the roster like Noah Clowney. But let's talk about the rest of the 5, starting with Dennis Smith Jr., who had a career resurgence, all things being equal. It has been so good to see Dennis Smith Jr. turn into a basketball player. I mean, he had one of those backup point guard Ricky Rubio career resurgences where we knew he had the talent, but he was just such a liability. I remember his Portland tape where his handle was worse than a one-armed wrestler in a grease pit. His handle was worse than Kobe Bryant thinking about passing. His handle was just horrible. And it looks like he went to the lab this offseason and fixed it. Hence his turnovers per game only at 1.5. It was 4.8 assists. I mean, you look at his per 100 possession turnovers. He came into his rookie year 4.8, 4.9, 5.3, 4.3, 5.3, 3.0, 1.8 on the Knicks. But that was on 3 games, so take that with a grain of salt. 3.1, 3.9 for Portland in his 5th season. And then last year, it just kind of figured some things out. It was only 2.8 turnovers per 100 possessions, which is up there with some of the better ball handlers in the NBA. And it's so impressive to see a guy fix that. He had a career low in turnovers, played with confidence, and even displayed that athleticism that everybody loved when he got taken in the draft right after Frank Ntilikina. Even LeBron James said that was a mistake. His shooting is still pathetic, and that's going to be a problem. 21.6% from the three-point line is just going to be an issue. But he was a really good backup for the Hornets and even played good starting minutes when LaMelo Ball went out with injury. He gave great defense in his steals per 100, 2.6, even his blocks per 100, 0.9. He was a lockdown defender, gave him a 114 defensive rating for the lowly Hornet squad, who was awful. And his VORP, I know it didn't come across great at negative 0.1, but his defensive box plus minus was a solid 1.2. He's always had some pretty good on-ball defense because of his athleticism, and last year just kind of felt like he turned the corner. He figured some things out for his career, and he's going to be a good backup guard for this team. Now, where does he fit in with Spencer Dinwiddie or Ben Simmons? I'm not really sure, but Dennis Smith Jr. is going to be more valuable than you think on this Brooklyn Nets squad if he continues to play like he did out there in Charlotte. Dariq Whitehead, though, going to be more of a mystery because he dealt with a horrible foot injury at Duke all year, and that kind of dropped him from being a top 5 prospect to going in the back half of the first round. He had a serious foot injury. It looked bad when he came back. He lost all explosiveness that had him getting that top 5 talent, but his shooting was still there. 42.9% in college is remarkable, and his game kind of reminds me right now of what AJ Griffin brought to the Atlanta Hawks last year, which is a guy who can make the 3, play decent enough defense, be a smart, cerebral player, but the injuries are going to kind of take down some of what his potential was, some of that athleticism. Can he revert back to what he was when he was a freak athlete as a young kid? Yet to be seen. He was still a 1-year guy, so there is potential there. We're just going to have to see with Dariq Whitehead. These foot injuries are always an issue when it comes to NBA players because there's 82 games in a season, 48 minutes a game. That's a lot of wear and tear on the body. Can Dariq Whitehead's body stand up to it? We're going to have to see. Darius Bazley is an interesting pickup, and I don't know. He's a weird guy. He was kind of on his way out of the league, Great size, great athleticism, can handle the rock a little bit, but he's just one of those tweeners. Too small for the 5, not athletic or graceful enough to play the 4. He's still young, theoretically a shot blocker. He needs consistency in his game, and he needs to really find a role where he's going to fit in, because he's always been a negative player on the offensive end. Last year was his worst in Phoenix, negative 3.7 offensive box plus minus. But his defense has always been pretty strong because he's agile enough on the perimeter. He's got to figure out some things. I don't really know if he's even going to earn minutes, let alone be a valuable contributor to this team. But this is going to be, his third fresh start ever since the Oklahoma City Thunder kind of gave up on him. And who was the other guy? Isaiah Roby, that they gave up on. So this will be take number 3. What can Darius Bazley offer to you? Can he be a really athletic guy who can't space the floor at all from the three-point line, career 31% three-point shooter? Can he be a small ball 5 at like 6'7", 200 pounds? Can he be a lockdown defensive specialist so Mikal Bridges doesn't have to play as much defense? I mean, it's just interesting fit. We're just going to have to see what Darius Bazley offers to this team. As for Trendon Watford, he was actually one of my favorite players on the Blazers. Just a blue-collar guy, decent player, capable of playing solid basketball and everything. Jack of all trades, master of none kind of guy. Tweener 4 or 5 that probably shouldn't start, but the Blazers squad was really tanking for the last 2 years. I appreciate his game. He's smart. He played 2 years of college ball at LSU, and he just knows how to play basketball the right way. He would ball handle a little bit for the team, evidenced by the 2.1 assists per game for the Blazers. He would play 5 for them when Yusuf Nurkic would go out. He would play 4 for them alongside, who did they play with? John Butler Jr., Ibu Baji. I mean, he just kind of did everything that I asked him to while shooting a decent clip from the three-point line. And even though he's not a great defender because of his lack of lateral speed, he would play the 4 for them. He would play the 5 for them. He just kind of did everything that Portland asked him to. So he's certainly got to get some credit for there. You look at his per 100 stats, 18.9 points per game, 9.8 rebounds. Obviously, per 100 possession stats aren't always one-to-one, but he was just a strong, solid player for them all around. He's not going to overwhelm you in blocks, only averaged 0.5 per 100 possessions last year. Not going to overwhelm you in incredible defense, and his shooting comes and it goes. Last year, he shot 39%, but then the year before that, he shot 23%. So it's going to be more of a wait and see with Trendon Watford. Is he going to be knocked down from 3, stretch 4, stretch 5, or is he going to be this guy who's kind of a liability on the defensive end? But I really like his game. He's only 23 years old, and if he can continue to get better, he'll certainly find his role on, if not the Nets, somebody out there is going to pick him up. Moving on to Noah Clowney, their other first-round pick, and I'm not really sure about his game. He's really undersized, just super skinny, about 6'9", 6'10". Is he a 4? Is he a 5? He doesn't move particularly well. I think his best role is going to be a small ball stretch 5, but he didn't shoot well at all in college, and then he lit up the combine, I guess, which is why everybody marketed him as a shooter. But his shooting splits were horrible. 28% from college, 48% field goal percentage. That's unacceptable. He's a decent rebounder given his size, but I kind of disagreed with the pick, and he's continuing to add to this center collection that the Brooklyn Nets have had for a while, where their centers are either undersized or too short, not great defenders, not great athletes. Outside of Nic Claxton, they don't really have a lot of athleticism at the 5 position. So I'm not sure how to feel about Noah Clowney. I didn't like his game out of Alabama, and I kind of disagreed with the pick. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, shoot 40% from the three-point line, be a Nic Claxton Jr. on the defensive end. We'll have to see, but I just don't trust the process here. And then the rest of the guys they have on two-way contracts, Armoni Brooks, we basically know what he is. He's an undersized shot maker. His shot will come and go. His defense most of the time goes. That's why he's had trouble finding a roster, just a really slight frame, about 6'3", I'll say, 190 pounds, but he is a bucket. And then Jalen Wilson, just kind of a 4-year guy to Kansas, not a tremendous athlete, can't shoot all that well, but he, rebounds well. I'm not sure how much he's going to earn any minutes this season. He's got to be one of those effort glue guys, does all the hard work, tries to guard the other team's best player sort of way to earn a spot on the roster. Career 33% from the three-point line isn't going to cut it in today's NBA. And then Harry Giles, I didn't even realize Harry was still in the NBA, but he's on their exhibition training camp contract. Moving on to the coach and culture ranking, where they're going to come in at tier 3. And I thought about putting them at tier 2. I'm not going to do that, but I'm a big fan of Jacques Vaughn and the way he just transformed this Nets squad. Like I said, as soon as he came in, they started playing defense, they started trying, and they started winning games, which is so remarkable to say when you have a team of Ben Simmons or James Harden and Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, you can't win basketball games with at least those three. And no, they couldn't because Steve Nash was such a bad coach. And Jacques Vaughn might be a good one. He's a defensively minded coach. The offense didn't look all that different. They still ran a lot of ISO plays. They're still pretty stagnant on that end. So that's going to determine if Jacques Vaughn is going to be more of a top 10 head coach or more of a middle of the pack head coach that's replaceable. But I like the culture that he brought to this team. They got a tough mentality, and it's going to be fun to see with these new players, with the Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson trying to elevate their roles, with the Spencer Dinwiddie leading the way, and with Ben Simmons cheerleading. Their GM, Sean Marks, is kind of in a tough spot. This Brooklyn Nets squad has always been in a really precarious situation, and now they're in one of the few situations where they're trying to tank, but they don't have their first round pick. So I'm not sure how this rebuild / retool is going to go. You look at their contracts, you're stuck with Ben Simmons. I mean, there's no way around it. That's the most untradeable contract in today's NBA for a guy who's not going to play. And if he does play, he's going to play horribly. He's a negative force for the locker room. Everybody has to stand up for him and say he's a really great player and a really good human being. And he's just going to give you 3 games a season, average 6, 5, and 4, and then earn $40 million. It's tough. And like, if there's some sort of career resurgence Ben Simmons can go on, that'll be great. For the most part, this is just dead cap to me, and he's going to offer your team nothing. Then you have Cam Johnson signing that extension. Good for him. Mikal Bridges continuing on his extension, but he's going to be somebody that you'll try to build around. And you might need to worry about his age because he is 27. How much longer can he get better and sustain while they still need to find another superpower for this team? If a Luka Doncic or Jason Tatum isn't available, do you think about trading Mikal Bridges in the future? Spencer Dinwiddie, he's the consummate professional. Fine with him being a point guard going into his age 30 season. Dorian Finney-Smith's contract, not a big fan of. They're kind of stuck with that. Like I said, he's a good 3-and-D player, but $13, $14, $15 million for the next 3 years. Player option on that last year. His Nic Claxton's contract is up. Royce O'Neale going into a contract year. He's also 30 years old. But then you have Noah Clowney and Derek Whitehead on their rookie deals. Dennis Smith Jr. and Lonnie Walker effectively stolen from the NBA, earning minimum money on 1-year deals. That's incredible signings. And then Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe rookie deals, and Trendon Watford picked up off the free agent heap as well. So their contract situation is interesting. Their draft pick situation is interesting. Their roster situation is interesting. Just everything about this Nets squad is kind of up in the air. So that's why they don't really have a season outlook. They could be a 500 team. They could be a top 5 team in the East. They could be a bottom 5 team in the East. Nobody really knows. So that is going to do it for this Nets squad, which is tough to grade and tough to talk about. So let me know what your thoughts are on them, what you agree with, what you disagree with, and I will catch you in the next one.